Today's scripture lesson is printed in your bulletin if you wish to follow along. Today's lesson comes from Luke chapter 13, verses 10 through 17. Now he was teaching in one of the synagogues on the Sabbath, and just then there appeared a woman with a spirit that had crippled her for 18 years. She was bent over and was quite unable to stand up straight. When Jesus saw her, he called her over and said, "Woman, you are set free from your ailment." When he laid his hands on her, immediately she stood up straight and began praising God. But the leader of the synagogue, indignant because Jesus had cured on the Sabbath, kept saying to the crowd, "There are 6 days on which work ought to be done. Come on those days and be cured, and not on the Sabbath day." But the Lord answered him and said, "You hypocrites, does not each of you on the Sabbath untie his ox or his donkey from the manger and lead it to water? And ought not this woman, a daughter of Abraham, whom Satan bound for 18 long years, be set free from this bondage on the Sabbath day?" When he said this, all his opponents were put to shame, and the entire crowd was rejoicing at all the wonderful things being done by him. May a blessing be added to the reading of the scripture.
In recent months, the Chick-fil-A restaurant chain found itself once again embroiled in controversy. This time, the controversy was not about issues related to sexuality, but issues related to the Sabbath. For the New York State legislature decided to get involved in food concessions related to its state freeway, and as part of this legislation, it aimed to regulate food concessions, threatening Chick-fil-A's long-standing policy of being closed on Sundays, the Sabbath. And so there was religious debate and controversy, hinging on the question, should we or should we not eat those Southern fried chicken sandwiches and signature waffle fries on Sundays? Chicken or no chicken? Oh, how over the centuries we humans have taken the gift of the Sabbath and have transformed the conversation into a series of don'ts or can'ts. Questions about should stores be open on the Sabbath? Some of you read in Forbes magazine that Hobby Lobby, closed on Sundays, if it were to open, would have an additional $1.1 billion in revenue. Pastor, is it right or wrong to be open on Sundays? Question on personal piety. Is Sabbath, is that on Sunday, or can I observe it, on a Tuesday? Questions about issues related to abstinence. Some of you, especially if you grew up in the South or in the Midwest, remember the blue laws? Remember those? Many of them have been repealed, but some of them are still around. And the question has been, is it acceptable or not to purchase beer at a gas station before 1 p.m.? Oh, how over the centuries we have taken the Sabbath and made it about a bunch of do's and don'ts. This human cheapening of the Sabbath really is nothing new under the sun. It had been going on since the days of Jesus in the first century. Before we walk back into our scripture passage today and we recall the story of Jesus healing the crippled woman, you'll remember the story. Once upon a time, Jesus is in the temple, and there in the temple, he meets this woman who has been crippled for 18 years. It is the Sabbath day, and he sets her free from that which was hunching her over. And the leader of the synagogue and the other Pharisees who were present really took issue at what Jesus had done and said, Jesus, you healed this woman on the Sabbath day. You can't do that. At which point Jesus rebuked them, sharing back, you hypocrites. Don't you untie your ox or your donkey and allow it on the Sabbath day to go get a drink of water? Look what I have done for this woman. I have set her free. For my sense is that Jesus is not just performing a miracle in the temple at this occasion, but he is also sharing back with all of the Pharisees present a teaching about the Sabbath. That Sabbath, understood in a big way, is not about a list of what you can or can't do. It is about knowing that you worship a God who deep in God's heart wants to see you be set free. At the moment in which Jesus performed this miracle in the temple, there were exactly 1,521 different things that you could not do on the Sabbath day. And Jesus sharing back with the Pharisees this incredible moment of healing seems to be suggesting, Pharisees, get beyond all of your legalisms here about the Sabbath. Or put another way, the word that is used to describe the woman's back is crooked, where the root word crook comes in our language today. So something may be getting stolen in this text. It's very interesting. And I do wonder if part of what's happening here is if the Pharisees are stealing from this woman the gift of Sabbath. Or put by one Bible commentator, who is really the one being straightened out in this text? Is it just the woman, or is it the leader of the synagogue? For initially, you'll recall in the Hebrew Bible in Exodus chapter 16, when the Sabbath got instituted, the Sabbath was instituted as a gift. That word was used twice by God in relationship to the Sabbath. And what had the Pharisees done in cheapening their understanding of the Sabbath? Stolen from this woman that gift. One of my favorite preachers on broadcast, she put it this way. She said, when parishioners come and ask her what they can or can't do on the Sabbath day, when I respond back to that question, I realize that because of this text in Luke's gospel, that any response I have from that place of what can and can't be done on the Sabbath is bound to be wrong and not to get at the essence of what Jesus is teaching. That the Sabbath is God's opportunity to set God's people free. The question often gets asked, what is the significance behind the woman's period of time that she had been crippled by whatever it was that was hunching her over? The number 18. This is very interesting. The number 18 in the Bible is only mentioned twice. Here in this scripture and one other time in the Hebrew Bible, it's in the book of Judges. When Eglon, the Moabite king, had taken God's people for a period of 18 years and held them in bondage or captivity. And after that 18-year period, God, through the power of God's Spirit, came and released God's people. And so what many scholars believe is happening in this text with the leaders of the synagogue is they are seeing this woman who has been crippled for 18 years, and part of what Jesus is doing is reminding them of who God is at the essence of God's personality. That the same God who let God's people free after 18 years is still at work in and through the Sabbath. And so bringing the question down personally for us, we ask ourselves, on this Sabbath day, what is it that is tying us down or burdening us this morning? Fears and worries about the future, the doctor's appointment or the event that's off in the distance, struggles as it relates to conflict that is weighing you down, or perhaps it might be something related to caring for a loved one and it has just been exhausting, or grief that has worn you out and has caused you to just simply feel as though you have been tied up in it all. Part of what this gospel text suggests is that Jesus is in the business of untying us to let us know that we can be set free from it all, if just for a minute or an hour or a morning or an afternoon or a day. I don't want to define it lest I be called a crook. Scholars are also quick to point out about the Sabbath this idea of freedom and the positivity of it all, that when you think about the 10 Commandments, part of what distinguishes the Sabbath command from many of the other commandments, honor the Sabbath day and keep it holy, is that it is in the affirmative. In other words, it's not do not covet, do not kill, do not commit adultery. It doesn't say do not neglect the Sabbath. Rather, the Sabbath command is in the affirmative because it has always been seen by God as a gift to God's people so that they might be set free, even if but just for a little while. I'll recall the story some Sundays ago when a young woman here as one of our musicians took on the great African-American spiritual I'll Fly Away. And in that moment in the sanctuary, there's a congregant, she told me, I really and truly believe for 4.5 minutes, finally, after everything that I was dealing with, I could fly away from it, if but just for a little while. Set free. Or the story of a friend of mine who was walking on the beach and very, very burdened by challenging situations that would not change in his life. And he watched the sunset and said, if God can do that, what else might God do? Set free. Or a story of another friend who met with some friends at a coffee shop and for 2 hours just had the opportunity to vent with friends and afterwards said, I feel like a burden just came off my back. Set free. Whether it's a day off or music or nature or friends or time alone or time at church or time apart from church or whatever it is, how might God work in and through that Sabbath moment or morning or afternoon or day to set you free? That is a big definition of the Sabbath. I'll close with a parable. This parable is not in the Bible, but it's in rabbinic literature, and it's a pretty good one. Once upon a time, God came to God's people and said, if you obey the Torah and the commands, I will give you the most precious thing that I have. And God's people replied back to God, what is the most precious thing that you have? God responded, the most precious thing that I have is the world to come. At which point God's people responded back, please give us an example of the world to come. And God's response, the Sabbath is an example of the world to come. What a shame it would be to diminish the Sabbath day into a list of don'ts and can'ts, when the Sabbath day can be whatever and wherever heaven on earth comes to you in your life. Now that's a big definition of Sabbath that can set you free, even after 18 years.